November 24, 1941. North of Klin, west of Moscow. The birch trees stand thin and white like bayonets. A wind from nowhere saws through canvas and bone. Gefreiter Hans Weber of 6. Company Infantry Regiment 6, 3. Panzer Division, cups his hands over the bolt of his carabiner 98K and breathes on it as if warming a child. The metal drinks his heat and gives nothing back. At his feet, powder-dry snow squeaks, each step a betrayed secret. Rouse, rouse, barks Feldwebel Dietz, voice clipped to keep it from shivering. They file past the wreck of an Opel Blitz whose canvas doors have frozen like tombstones. The truck's hood is open. A blowtorch licks the Maybach's oil pan with blue fire. A driver in a stiff scarf shakes his head. "We Siefenleim," he mutters, like soap glue. Someone wedges a candle under an MG-34's receiver and shields the flame with a mittened hand. The machine gun's close tolerances have turned treacherous in the cold. The assistant gunner works the charging handle. It moves, then stops as if the steel suddenly prefers another job. At dawn's edge, the sky is a sheet of tin. Breath hangs as frost smoke. The company edges through a village that has become a skeletal diagram of life. Windowless isbas, a well rope turned into a frozen question mark, a horse dead upright as if surprised. A woman in a shawl watches them with the eyes of winter itself. Weber swaps the bolt in his rifle for the one he's kept inside his coat, under his armpit, all night. The oiled thing still fights him. He slaps it. The slap stings like a rule broken. A Zundap KS750 motorcycle coughs once, twice, then gives up. "Battery tot," the rider says flatly, unbuckling and trotting to keep warmth. The company halts in the lee of a ruined barn. Dietz squats over a map that no longer matches the world. "Kalinin front probes here," he says, tapping, breath rimmed with crystals. "Hold this tree lean until the panzers move again." Pause. If they move. Across the white, sound slides forever. Somewhere left at 10. 5 centimeters LUFH-18 howitzer speaks one round and then goes mute. Weber listens for the second shot as a man listens for his heart. It doesn't come. "Breech froze," murmurs the gun's runner when he lopes past, face iced with a rhyme that might be fear, might be the air itself. The runner clutches a tin of gasoline like a relic. "Heat it, then she'll go," he says as if saying so could make it true. The noon light is no warmer than the dawn. In a copse of fur, Lieutenant Karl Reisinger's Panzer III sits under a throw of captured Soviet sheepskins like a sleeping animal. Crewmen drain black coolant into jerrycans, fingers trembling around the spigot. They will reheat it over the field kitchen stove and pour it back at first light. Antifreeze is a rumor from another war. A loader cracks track ice with a hammer, flinching at each spark. "Don't hit the pins," Reisinger says not unkindly. "We're walking if you do." Weber's world tightens to little tasks. He stuffs straw into his boots, then newspaper, then a prayer that feet remember blood. He wraps his ears in scarf and hangs the grenade he doesn't want to touch inside his greatcoat so the fuse won't turn brittle. He watches a man urinate on a bolt face and then work it, jaw set, dignity a currency no longer accepted. A medic checks fingers by pushing a needle under nails. Men look away. The Russians come on skis at dusk, as quiet as owls. White smocks make them into moving absences. Weber hears them first, the low hiss of wooden runners and a small chuckle of laughter that might be real or the way wind tells jokes in trees. "Feint. Licks." Dietz's voice cracks and the guns try to answer. The MG-34 coughs, jams, coughs again. Weber works his bolt. It sticks at the shoulder and then slides with the horrid, grating smoothness of ice. A muzzle flash blooms in the black, a PPSH-41 ripping a seam through the air. Weber presses his cheek to wood that burns with cold and aims at a shape that is more guess than man. He squeezes. The rifle barks, recoil a shock, bolt a lead weight he forces open with the heel of his hand. Tracers stitch the snow flat and red. A Soviet mortar plops and thumps, 82mm bombs walking in from nowhere, their blasts swallowed by drifts that make sound quiet and shrapnel fast. Down. Dietz shoves a boy into a shell scrape that was only a thought this morning. Weber tastes iron, blood from a lip cracked by freezing air. The PPSH's drum purrs somewhere to the right, a Mosin's slow heartbeat answers. The white smocks melt back into the birches, and silence drops like a lid. Later, as darkness owns everything not held in a glove, Weber rubs a lump of axle grease between his fingers and feels it turn from stone to something almost believing. He smears the MG-34's feed tray, thinner than any manual would allow. "It'll run dirty," the gunner says, a man making a pact with the machine. In the distance, a Katyusha battery clears its throat, one stuttering ripple of rockets tearing open the sky, and then the far line glows like a city's dying. In the barn's lee, Reisinger holds his palm over the Panzer's exhaust grill, counting seconds. The engine gives him nothing. He nods once as if acknowledging a stubborn friend and turns to his men. "We dig. Tonight we are infantry." The cold sharpens. The night purpled with hint of snow. Weber presses a mittened hand to the stock of his rifle and whispers to it as if to a skittish horse. The steel says nothing. The wind says everything. December 2, 1941. East of Klin, in a birch-laced lowland that used to be a meadow before the war froze it into glass. The thermometer nailed to the field kitchen side reads a number that stops jokes. -30-something and falling. Fat snow floats without hurry, the only soft thing left. Lieutenant Karl Reisinger crouches under his Panzer III with a petrol blow lamp that screams like a trapped bird. Flame licks the sump and the smell of scorched oil loops under the hull. Another 10 minutes, the driver says, breath fogging inside his scarf. Gearbox is a brick. They have drained and reheated the radiator twice since dawn. The coolant still gelled in the elbow of a pipe and bulged it like a snake swallowing an egg. A crewman unlatches the engine covers and winces as the hinge shrieks. Metal on metal, no kindness left in the grease. We should have winter oil, the loader murmurs. We should have a lot of things, Reisinger says, and grins with the edge of a man who won't let anger open its mouth. On the ridge above, Feldwebel Dietz kneels behind the MG-34 again. He has dismantled the gun, wiped every trace of summer lubricant, and relubed with gasoline he will deny using. The thin, dangerous stuff glints like exhaustion. It'll light if you sneeze, the assistant gunner says. Don't, Dietz answers and slots the top cover down. He works the handle. It cycles, grudging and cold, but it cycles. Weber's hands are a pair of strangers. He flays them with slaps, feeds feeling into fingers with curses. The wool of his gloves has stiffened into boards. He strips a round from the carabiner's clip, the brass hurting him, the motion absurd, fighting steel with skin. He stares past the sights into a world that has turned colors he doesn't remember having names for. He blinks, his eyelashes stick. A column forms along the icy track. Opel blitzes with tarpaulins draped like funeral cloths, a few SDKFC. 251 half-tracks growling thinly, their crews huddled over radiator curtains. Horses stand hip-shot, breath pouring from nostrils like ghosts. A battery of Pak 38s clatters into place, their crews stamping to wake their feet, cursing the way the traverse wheels turn as if filled with sand. Führerstellung, the battery commander shouts, Austrian vowels frosting the words. A gun team digs the spade into frozen ground. The spade bounces. A man swings a pick, it rings like a chapel. Another takes a chunk of explosive, buries it in a scrape and lights a fuse. The bang thumps the chest more than the ears and leaves a crater in which the spade finally bites. They wheel the gun in panting. The layer swings the traverse. It moves a hand width and stops. He smacks it with the heel of his fist. The fist hurts more than the gun moves. From the woods, Soviet skiers materialize at a trot, one behind another, heads bowed like monks. White smocks ripple. The lead man raises a clenched fist and sinks. The line puddles into the snow, gone. A moment later, a Red Army lieutenant whispers to his squad in the speech of cold places. Short, certain syllables with no wasted motion. Right flank. The gun. On my signal. His Valinki press silent prints. A PPH-41 hugs his chest like a stove that actually works. Weber hears it, the little chuff of snow from skis pushing off. He scrapes a glove on the sight to clear ice. Links im Wald, he barks and the platoon leans that way as if hearing with their shoulders. Dietz squeezes the butterfly triggers. The MG-34 snarls, chewing out a belt in a spit of orange light. Frost spray kicks up in a line that looks like the wake of an invisible boat. The gun seizes. He slaps the cover, rips the belt sideways, racks twice, fires again. The Soviets answer with the flat, chopping scream of a PPH bursting from the treeline. Splinters flicker off Weber's log. Down on the road, Reisinger's Maybach catches with a cough and then a full-throated, high-pitched whine that makes love to every ear on the ridge. He slaps the turret ring with a glove. Los. The Panzer lurches ahead, its tracks cracking free from the ground like bread crust breaking. The driver slides his boot on a pedal that does not want to be a pedal. The tracks, narrow and cruel in the snow, hunt for grip. The tank slews sideways, catches, plows a trench of glittering powder. Panzer vor. Someone yells because someone always does when a tank moves in weather like this. It's a charm as much as an order. The vehicle waddles across the field, the gunner sucking in breath between his teeth to keep it from freezing to the periscope rubber. The 5 cm KWK snorts a shell. The recoil feels like a decision made on a better day. A little woodsman's hut detaches from the treeline in a cloud of splinters and smoke. Men in white pour out of it, and the hull coaxial rips a seam through the snow. The Pak 38 tries to traverse. The wheel turns reluctantly. Grease is a stone, the gun layer says through his scarf. He forces it, teeth bared, puts his whole weight on it. The carriage groans. Foya. The light gun cracks, a clean sound that seems to slice the cold. The round disappears into the trees with a noise like a door slamming at the end of a hallway. A Soviet T-34 noses out of the woods with the calm of an ox. Its sides are painted with a sloppy wash of white. Snow stacks on its flat plates as if the tank were born of the field. The V2 diesel sends up a dark, sure breath. The wide tracks float on the crust. It's 76. 2 mm gun turns as if it were never taught about winter. Deckung. Dietz drags the MG behind a log a heartbeat before a shell dings the ridge with an angry bee of shrapnel. Weber fires, works the bolt, fires. The Mosin across the field answers, slower, harder. A PPSH team slides wide and flurries past the pack, spraying. A German collapses, not cinematic, just forgotten, gloves in the snow like thrown bread. A Soviet sapper flops to his belly and wriggles under the gun's shield with a stick grenade, his breath fogging the steel. The gun crew kicks him away, the layer stomping his wrist and crushing the matchbox trigger. The sapper rolls, vanishes back into his element. The pack roars again. The fight stutters and moves, more ice than fire, more breath than blood, more grinding than glory. Reisinger's tank slews, corrects, coughs once and dies, the engine freezing in motion as if insulted. Battery, the driver says, eyes wide with a knowledge older than war. Reisinger bangs his fist against the radio. The set squawks and then locks into silence. Its guts a brittle glass violin that no one can play now. Around them the winter pays out its rope. The sun slides and is gone by mid-afternoon, and with it goes the last heat that could have been mistaken for mercy. December 6, 1941. Pre-dawn west of Moscow, near Krasnaya Polyana. The cold bites down to the marrow. Trails of breath drift in the black like banners that forgot their poles. Somewhere behind the German line, an organ of steel clears its throat. The first BM-13 rockets leave their rails with a rising, feral scream, and the horizon becomes a row of blooming fists. The light washes over the snow and then is gone, leaving blackness you can taste. Weber lies flat in a shallow scrape and presses his cheek to the rifle stock until it no longer feels like a stranger. Dietz whispers down the line, "No fire. Hold. Let them come." His voice is a woolen thing in the frost. Off to the right, the Pack 38's crew holds their breath, the layer's hand poised like a question on the traverse wheel. Beyond that, in the dark, Reisinger's crew pull the starter crank with fingers wrapped in rags, faces masked in grease. The engine says nothing. They look at each other with the complicated politeness of men who will share a ditch now. Footsteps whisper over crusted snow, hundreds then thousands. They come in white smocks that turn men into smudges. They come in felt boots, Valinki that kiss the snow without telling its secrets. They come on skis, low and fast, poles a-flicker, breath hard and silent. One carries a Mosin like a staff, another cradles a peepish for one that hums inside itself with the promise of heat. A commissar's voice moves along the edge like a blade. "Do not shout. Use the knife. The knife is the frost." "Now," says a voice that does not need to be loud, and the Soviet line rises from the snow like a new landmass. Mortars begin, 82 mm, 120 mm, each round a thrown hammer. They plop, hiss and punch as if the earth were a drum. A 76 mm divisional gun barks from an invisible edge. Sure. Professional. More rockets slide across the sky, rolling the dark up and putting it back down again. Dietz opens the MG. It answers him like a sulky stallion that decides to obey at the last second. The burst saw's low jinx steadies. Men in white skid and tumble. One gets up, runs 3 steps and sits down with an almost surprised neatness, hands on knees. Weber chooses shapes with a method that has become instinct. He feels the trigger, presses, moves, opens the bolt, slow enough not to shear the ice that wants to weld it shut, fast enough to keep the rhythm. Shot, breath, bolt, sight, shot. The dance has no music but the rattling of a gun somewhere behind, the cough and hiccup of vehicles thinking about life. On the gun line, the pack crew find the wheel moves now, grease warmed by terror and fingers, just as a KV-1 shoulders out of the trees. It comes unhurried, all slab and contempt, the kind of thing a man dreams of throwing a spear at and waking sweating. The layer angles the barrel, the loader slams the round, the breech claps shut with a too slow click. Foya. The muzzle cracks white against black. The shell skips off the KV's front with the tawdry, infuriating ring of a coin on a tabletop. Flanken, the commander hisses. They lever the carriage like furniture, boots slithering, breath roaring in scarves. The gun slews. The layer breathes on the sight, clears a circle with a thumb, finds a track sprocket. Foya. The hammer crack and then a grunt from the tank as if it has been told a rude joke. It stalls a half step then moves again, slow. A T-34 edges beside it, smoke from its exhaust streaming a darker stripe across the world. Reisinger and his crew hunch in their shallow hole as the tank they cannot move looks over them like a father who will not help. Panzerfaust. The loader mutters out of reflex and catches himself. The word belongs to a future not yet invented. Haftladung. The magnetic shape charges in a bag that smells of oil and fear. Unless you want to run up and kiss it, Reisinger says, and teeth show white in a face drawn tight as drumhead. He looks toward the village, where a platoon of sappers fumbles with satchel charges, fingers like carved wood. The Soviet infantry comes on, not with a roar but with the quiet cruelty of men who have learned night and white. A sniper in a snow hood lies on a rooftop and lets his Mosin breathe. He watches a shape with binoculars, a man who points, moves, points, an NCO. He holds and then presses, the rifle sliding back into his shoulder like a well-trained dog. Dietz folds at the waist and goes to his knees with surprise on his mouth. Weber sees him drop and feels a small bitter knot pull tight behind his sternum. He fires at the roof without sight, anger making warmth the only way it knows how. The counterattack is not one blow but 100 hands. Ski troops slice the flanks, their poles clicking against trunks, their PPSH drums coughing short, mean bursts that sound like someone tearing cloth carefully. Sappers with wire cutters flicker under the barbed tinsel and then wriggle through, slow and serpent. A Red Army lieutenant, Sergei Volkov, waves a squad into the ditch with 2 fingers, a motion learned far east in a place with more trees and fewer roads. Wait for the panzer, he whispers, meaning the T-34 he can hear in his bones. It comes, whitewashed and patient, engine rolling a deeper note than any Maybach, diesel breath sweet and heavy. It noses the hedge, noses the ditch, and settles, bow up, as if smelling for Germans. Volkov taps the driver's glassy with his knuckles. The hatch opens a crack and a wool cap nods. Now, Volkov says, and his men flow around the tank like water finding its level. German flares ladder up, green, white, a screaming red, and the field becomes a theater. In that brief light, Weber sees faces. A boy with frost on his eyebrows like a grandfather's, a man whose cheeks are raw meat, a woman's scarf on a soldier's neck. He squeezes the trigger and feels the rifle answer with the blankness of a duty done too often. The MG stutters, chokes, and stutters again. Someone pours a splash of gasoline on the breech and slaps at a tongue of fire with his mitten, cursing before the prayer arrives. Zurückfallen. Linie 2. A runner's voice cracks, and yet it carries. Men peel back, not a route but a receipt, paid this much, withholding the rest. The pack crew hook on, the gun jumps and slews, a wheel falling into a buried furrow, the carriage slewing, curses flowers in 3 dialects. Reisinger drags the Haftholadung bag closer and then doesn't move. He looks at his men and shakes his head once. Not today, he says. The KV rumbles past with the serenity of a glacier. The Soviet line settles onto the German position as if it always belonged here. A banner of breath rises, wavers, disappears. The air tastes of cordite, diesel, and the weird, clean knife of cold. In the middle of it all, the winter smiles and keeps its counsel. December 15th to 19th, 1941. The road out of Klin is a black ribbon glazed like a butcher's floor. The order comes down the line with all the gravity and none of the ceremony. Pull back to a line you can hold. Men do not cheer. They stand, stamp, bend, and begin to lift the war back onto their shoulders. Weber's platoon files past wagons that have become monuments. Horses stand ribbed, tails clotted with ice, eyes old and patient. A field kitchen, the Gulaschkanon, breathes an argument of steam into the bitter air. The cook slaps ladle to pot. One, he says without malice, ladling something gray and honest into mess tins. Men curl hands over the tin, letting heat climb back into bones one rung at a time. Behind a barn that remembers summer, Reisinger's crew props their tank on blocks to free the tracks trapped in an ice jail of their own making. Blowlamps chatter. A man with a shovel chips at a frozen mass that was mud yesterday. Gasoline in the oil. Thinner. It'll start, the driver says, and someone snorts because laughter is another kind of fire. The crew drape a horse blanket over the engine deck and weight it with ammo boxes. They siphon petrol into a Dixie and set it to warm on the field kitchen's edge. The cook pretends not to see. Snow begins again, small, uncommitted flakes that yet claim everything. The column grinds forward, a procession of half-tracks, limbers, trucks with tarps like coffins, men on foot with bayonets turned into whitebeards by rhyme. A telephone line slouches along the road edge. A patrol of Soviet sappers ghosts out of a copse, snips it with a sound too clean for war and melts back. Moments later, mortars pad in from an angle that was not on the map. A 120mm bomb folds a cart as if offended. A mule screams like a woman and then stops. Into the trees. Dietz's voice is there in Weber's head before Weber realizes he's already moving. They throw themselves into the birches where the snow hides dips like traps. A PPSH flutters from somewhere low. Snow puffs jump into the air like breath. Weber fires and sees nothing but the suggestion of movement. The winter makes everything polite and cruel. No mud, no blood splash, only men sitting down and not standing up again. On the road, a Pack 38 crew throws their guns trail into a ditch and pivots, wheels digging through crust into something like purchase. A T-34 appears at the bend and stops, nose cocked, exhaust snoring. It looks cautious, almost thoughtful. The Pack barks, the round clangs off a plate angled by a designer who knew more than comfort. The T-34 backs into the treeline, then comes again from another angle, tracks whispering. A ski detachment oozes along its flank, their white hoods belling with each breath. The Pack swings, grease flowing like old honey now that fires and fear have warmed it. The loader stuffs a round that bites his mitten. The shot takes a track. The T-34 limps and then refuses to admit it. It backs away, towed by a patience that can afford time. Night falls with a speed that makes men feel late for their own breath. Fires spring up under trucks, under the bellies of half-tracks, under the oil pans of cars that will not be cars until coaxed like newborns. Flames lick steel and paint. Shadows bob at the ends of arms. A trickle of gasoline spells itself into the snow and becomes a handspan of blue. Men pretend not to notice. Batteries in the tent, someone orders, and a supply corporal hauls the heavy hearts out of radios and tucks them into canvas like babies pinned for warmth. Greatcoats stiffen. A man ties rags over boots until his feet look like bundles of rags. Another cuts a slit in a sheepskin and pulls it over his head, hair bristling with static. An unteroffizier holds up a newspaper as if the print might still be important and then stuffs it down the front of his tunic to make himself 2 pages thicker. From the black, a Soviet patrol slithers. Lieutenant Sergei Volkov has frost whitening his eyebrows and a grin of fatigue bound to his teeth. Cut the tail, he whispers. They don't shout "Ura." They don't need to. They lay a mine in the ruts where a truck's chains bite. They loop a wire through a telephone sled's handle and walk it off into the trees. They leave a dead branch across the road that looks like the road. They become rumors again. Dawn shows a world that tried to move and mostly did. The columns stretched and thinned, the line left over like a ribbon pulled from a pocket. Reisinger's tank coughs and catches. The Diesel's cousin, his Maybach, snatches and then runs high-pitched, daring the day to kill it again. He slaps the turret cheek and almost laughs. "You old bastard," he says, and the tank doesn't answer. Weber walks with his rifle cradled under his arm like a violin, bolt inside his coat as always. He sees a man with hands he can't feel pick up a dropped can of oil and tuck it under his arm the way a father tucks a child. He sees a chaplain make the sign of the cross in the air and have it freeze for a second as frost smoke. He sees Dietz's replacement, a corporal with eyes that have learned numbers, count heads and write them down with a pencil that squeaks on a damp pad. Soviet artillery opens somewhere behind the woods, a polite, insistent discussion that moves from left to right and back again, testing, poking. Rockets come in low. A BM-13 battery must have found a little plateau and an officer who likes lines. The screams slide into the column, unwinding men and vehicles like thread. A truck erupts into black flowers of canvas and tar. A horse falls forward on its knees and neatly dies. A boy from Bremen covers his head with both arms as if rain had returned to be simple. "Halt a Beffel," someone says softly, more to the wind than to Weber. The no retreat word will be official in a day too. For now, it lives in rumor and in the way officers look beyond the next tree line as if there were no other page. The column curves into a new line drawn by maps that no longer agree with roads. The winter looks on and does not mind. January 3, 1942. A village with a name the Germans pronounce 3 different ways sits in a hollow, its well frozen to the bucket. Snow has banked against the leeward walls until the houses seem shorter, as if winter has put a hand on their heads and pressed. The line is a ring now, a hedgehog foxhole squared up with planks and doors ripped from their hinges. Gefreiter Weber wakes to a pain in his hands that has replaced waking. He rubs them on the stovepipe of a sheet iron save-dish oven, the pioneers assembled from scrap. The iron ticks as it cools. "Get the bolts," Dietz says, alive not the same, slapping his hands together, breath coming hard. They pass the basket of rifle bolts like bread. Each man has learned to sleep without the heart of his weapon, the bolt tucked into an armpit, under a sheepskin, in a sock. Weber slots his back into the carabiner and works it once, twice. It slides. It is a small miracle that no longer feels like one. Outside men build. They tack up burlap as windbreaks, stuff straw between logs, nail felt stolen from a shed onto boots. Someone produces a roll of white bedsheets and they become Schneehemden, snow shirts, over field gray. They will freeze into armor you can't move in, but for the hour they comfort the eye. A corporal with engineer tabs shows how to melt snow for water without scorching the pot. A little at first, then more. The lesson passes like contraband wisdom. In a dugout that smells of damp wood and bitter coffee, Lieutenant Reisinger spreads a map with squares on it, German blocks perched on the edges of Russian emptiness. The Panzer is there in the lane, engine cowled in a quilt of rags, ready to cough itself to life if the sky doesn't punish them for the thought. He has siphoned gasoline into oil until the mixture behaves like courage. He has his crew rotate the turret by hand each hour to keep the ring from freezing to itself. He sleeps with the turret key on a string round his neck. On the far tree line, a Soviet sniper watches through glass that fogs, clears, fogs. He lifts his head, breathes away from the scope, settles back. He wears a sheepskin that smells of the animal that wore it first, and under that a Telegrika padded jacket. His boots are Valenki, felt boats on which the world floats. He watches Germans in white that is too clean, sees where the snow has fallen away from their shoulders and slabs you could pick up, mark of cloth frozen and then let go. He waits for the man who will stand to piss without asking the sky for permission. He will not wait long. At first light, Soviet mortars speak, low, respectful. A patrol in white slides up to the wire and snips. "Hörst du?" Dietz asks and Weber nods. He hears everything, which means he hears nothing. The fight is inside the hushed sound of frost falling from a branch. The first shots are not shots. A sled creaks, a runner clicks against ice. Then a PD-27 light machine gun chatters from a hollow and sows the lip of the trench with sparks. The MG-34 answers, condescends to work, then decides otherwise. The assistant gunner has a canteen in his armpit. He splashes a capful onto the feed tray, blows and watches a brief, mean flame call the gun back to life. "Schieß, Alter," he whispers to the metal. It obeys with something like amusement. On the right, a Red Army assault group piles into a yard and becomes furniture. Men behind a half door, a woman's wardrobe on its side, a stove dragged into place and belly down. A PPSH rattles against a wall and drills little holes in plaster that puff powder onto the floor. A German sticks his head around a corner and it comes back wrong. The Soviet lieutenant, Volkov again, eyes lined with a season that has aged him, throws a grenade that bounces under a table and booms like a stamped foot. He waves 2 men toward the lane. "The tank," he says, and they nod as if the tank is a season 2. Reisinger hears them before he sees them. He snaps the key, the engine coughs, catches, flares. He feels the vibration through his boots like a pulse under a wrist. "Los," he says into the throat mic and his voice is matching metal now. The Panzer noses into the lane, whitewashed like a lie. Snow slumps off the mantlet. He swings the 5 cm gun and sights along a line cracked into the frost on the periscope lens. A shape moves, white on white, and he squeezes. The shell hammers a fence into splinters and flips a shadow into the air. He thinks he has hit a man and does not let the thought in. The Hull MG chatters, a metronome for panic. Weber fires, works, fires. His breath has learned to come and go without fogging the sight. He watches a Soviet in a white cape clatter into the street, slip, regain balance with the neat, unthinking grace of a man who has always walked on winter. He is beautiful in that instant. Weber hates him for it and then does not. He drops him because the rifle is the only sentence left to write. The fight bleeds backward at noon, both sides too tired to ensure the present tense. A new snow begins, fat flakes that erase edges as they arrive. A lull. In the lull, someone brings a kettle and a tin of ersatz coffee, the color of sadness, the heat of reprieve. Men wrap hands around mugs. A Soviet across the road does the same. If they waved, would anything change? They don't. The winter is watching. That afternoon an order crackles in from Here's Grupp mit, a voice turned to wire. Hold. Hold here, hold there, hold on. Men nod because there is nothing else. The Soviets send a little party with white flags to pick up their dead from the wire, and the Germans let them. The snow makes everyone decent for 6 minutes. Night. Weber tucks the bolt into his armpit, slides down on boards that are less honest than the floor would be. He feels the ache of 100 small new lives in fingers and toes that almost went. He hears as he falls the slow ticking of cooling metal, the tiny discharge of frost somewhere that snaps like a twig. He dreams of rain that falls warm and useless. Outside, the winter leans its back against the village and smiles without lips. The guns will start again at dawn. They will keep starting. Men will learn how to thin oil and thicken courage, how to turn sheets into camouflage and newspaper into insulation, how to sleep with the heart of their rifles and the key to their tanks under their skin. And still, when they put their hands on steel at -40, the steel will decide what kind of day it will be.